Welcome to Bible Study with Friends. We're here continuing our Bible study in the book of Mark. I'm here with my good friend Stan Ford, and we are together separately, continuing our Bible study verse by verse through the Gospel of Mark. We are in the New American Standard Version, but you can follow along with any version. It'll be fine, and we're glad you're here. Be sure, if you're blessed, to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. That helps us with YouTube. And be sure to hit the little bell, because then every time I post this, you'll receive an email that says there's a new video for you to watch. And we're doing this with a number of friends. How you doing, Stan?
Doing good. How are you, Julian?
I'm doing good. We're both sitting in our offices, enjoying life separately from everybody else. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, listen, last week we ended up at verse 28. Now, that's right in the middle of a section. So let me do a little reminder. This is the introduction. Mark is this idea of the action hero, the servant hero. Again, to the Roman mind wanted to know what kind of person this was. And we're watching for the word and the word immediately, because that's a theme. Jesus immediately did this, he immediately did this, and he did this, and he did this, and immediately this, and this, and this. And we're going to see that pattern even today going through. So in the first chapter, we're still in chapter 1, but the first chapter we had the introduction of the hero, basically John the Baptist. And then we had the baptism and the temptation of the hero. That was in verse 9 through 11 was the baptism, and then the temptation is verse 12 and 13. Not a lot of details, just the idea that he's communicating the idea of what the hero is launching his ministry, what's he going through launching his ministry. Then starting from verse 14, we have the mission of Jesus, the mission of the hero starting. And this is a kind of an introduction into what the mission of Christ for the next 3 years is going to look like. And the first section was his followers obey him. So this shows he has a command, he has an authority. And the Romans, we would be interested in what kind of authority, what kind of presence did Jesus have? And the first section we see is when he said to a follower, "Follow me," they immediately obeyed him. So he's got that presence and that authority. The next section is demons obey him, and we finished. We were doing that last week. We were about in the half of it, where when he encounters a demon or an unclean spirit, also called a demon, all he has to do is just say, "Leave," and they obey. In fact, they know who he is, and we're going to see that today. So let's turn in our Bibles. Let me pull up a screen share here and go back to this. Okay. Now we are in, we're at verse 29 is where we left off last week. Let me pull it up. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. So here is this section of demons obeying him, and we saw last week Jesus just basically said, "Be quiet and come out," and he did. Now, we saw last week that the demon says, "I know who you are. You're the Holy One of God." And Jesus says, "Be quiet." Now, you might say, well, why doesn't Jesus just take the publicity while he can? But one thing he's shown here is his authority to establish his own agenda. Jesus is not setting his agenda of mission in response to demons or even response to the people. He has a plan. He is exerting that plan. So Jesus does not want the demons to be the ones who are announcing his presence and announcing his ministry. He wants to control that. So we see that again. Now let's pick up in verse 29. Now we see something interesting in verse 29. And immediately, there's that word again.
Yeah.
We see immediately the news spread in verse 28. We see immediately
Yeah.
In fact, this is a double whammy because this is a and immediately.
Yeah.
This is,
Yeah.
the word and is just a continuation of the action. This and this and this. And then in 29, it says, and immediately after they came out of the synagogue, they came into the house of Simon and Andrew. And they came with James and John. These are the guys that just responded in obedience to him. And who is Simon?
Oh, Simon.
They
It's
came into
not
the house of Simon and
Simon.
Andrew.
It's not Simon Peter.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it
Yes.
is. Yeah,
Okay.
it is.
Okay.
In fact, when we're Bible studying, we don't want to just read past these kind of names. We want to think about who is that guy? Okay, Simon and Andrew. We just saw earlier in this chapter. Simon and Andrew are brothers, and Simon is another name for Peter. In fact, in the scriptures, Peter is called Simon 16 times, and he's also called Simon Peter 27 times. He's also called Simeon one time. He's called by a number of names. Jesus calls him Peter. Sometimes Jesus calls him Simon. Sometimes Jesus calls him Simon Peter. It depends upon the point he's trying to make here. But we see here that he's going into the house of Peter and Andrew, right?
Yeah.
And he's got with him another two brothers, James and John, who were Jesus' cousins. Now they go to Simon's house, and what's the first thing we notice in verse 30?
His mother-in-law was sick.
Now, to have a mother-in-law, what do you have to have?
Have to have a wife.
You have to have a wife.
Yeah.
So here clearly and very nonchalantly in scriptures, it's making the point that Peter was married. So this whole thing about Peter being the first Catholic pope, and that priests and popes and all that couldn't be married and they had to be celibate and all this stuff, it comes way later, about the 4th century. It makes no apologies for the fact that Peter owned his own home, number one, but also Peter had a wife and a mother-in-law, and she is the mother-in-law is there, and she's sick with a fever, and immediately they spoke to her about Jesus. They spoke to Jesus about her. And 31, he came to her and raised her up, taking her by the hand, and the fever left her, and she waited on him. Now, what do we see here about what was wrong with the mother-in-law?
That she just had a fever. She was
right. We see that it says clearly she had a fever, and Jesus just cured her of the fever. Now, this falls into, it's important for us to notice, and it was important for the Romans to know, us Gentile readers, not every illness is a demon.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, there are demons that cause illnesses, but clearly we should not fall into this thing about, these are primitive people, and they believe that if you sneezed, it was a demon, and everything was demons. Everything was all panicky about demons. But clearly here, Mark's writing, and he says, "No, Jesus just cured her of a fever, of an illness."
It's because of the fallen nature that we get sick.
That's exactly right. That's as a result of sin. God is going to allow us to experience illness. Now, sometimes he allows a demon. And I believe today in the 21st century, demons exist, but demons are not causing every little, I have a hangnail, so that's a demon attacking me. There are also just plain old-fashioned illnesses. And that's important for us to know in the middle of COVID-19, that we can say, Satan can use COVID-19 in the lives of people, and he can affect people demonically, but not all illness and not all COVID-19 attacks are demons.
Yeah.
And so this shows, if we're paying attention, this shows a certain sophistication that they're not just saying, oh, everything is a demon, everything is bad. So it says here that she was lying sick with a fever. Doesn't say she had a demon. And immediately they spoke, and he came to her and raised her up, taking her by the hand, and the fever left her. So Jesus is showing authority. This is the word immediately, and
Yeah.
he's showing authority over disease, just disease. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
We sometimes
go ahead.
give Satan too much credit for what he's not doing.
Right. Exactly. It could just be our fallen state.
Yes.
Of living in sin. And a lot of times we do stuff to our bodies. It's like, I used to eat everything in sight, and then I went, oh, Satan is making me fat. No, Satan is not making me fat. I'm making me fat because I was basically doing the sin of gluttony. I was just eating too much. So we got to be careful here not to assume that those Old Testament people or those New Testament people in the first century, that was 2,000 years ago, and they were kind of naive and they blamed everything on Satan and everything on demons. No, there was clearly in their mind, there were illnesses and demons. We're going to see that again because it says here in 33, it says, 31, it says, he raised her up and she began to serve them. Now, that's an interesting thing that if Christ deals in your life and he heals in your life, the natural and spiritual response is a life of service.
Yeah.
To him. We serve Christ. And that's this idea of the bondservant that we see so often. I'm studying James with somebody, and Peter and John, they all describe themselves as bondservants, voluntary servants who are spiritually cured by the Lord, and our natural response is we then begin to serve him.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what she did.
Yeah.
She began to serve him. Now, it says she waited on him. Then this is an interesting little detail here, and it would go over the head of a Roman reader, but not a Jewish Roman reader. It says, when evening came, after the sun had set, they began bringing to him all who were ill and those who were demon possessed.
Yes.
So we see a couple of interesting things here. Number one, it gives us the detail when evening came. Now, why is that significant?
It's the end of the Sabbath.
Earlier in the chapter, it says Jesus came in on the Sabbath. Now, a Roman Gentile, he wouldn't pay attention to that other than, okay, it was some kind of a Jewish day of celebration or something. But the Jewish believer would see this is a significant detail that the Jewish people didn't come out to be ministered to by Jesus until sunset. And that's the end of Sabbath. Sabbath was sunrise Friday, sunrise Saturday morning and sunset Saturday night. And that was Sabbath. So that's a kind of an interesting little detail. Now, one of the things that shows is this is a narrative by a witness. This isn't just somebody telling the story of Jesus, because it would have been very easy to say, well, he cured his mother-in-law, or Peter's mother-in-law, and then people started coming out to him. Well, that would make perfect sense, but this shows the detail. Peter is there, and remember, Peter is the one who's dictating this to John Mark. So this is an eyewitness account from Peter, and he's saying, my mother-in-law was cured and began to serve. And then that evening, after Sabbath is up, while it was still dark, it was in the evening, Jesus got up. Now, I'm sorry, I'm back up here. When the evening came, after the sun had set, They began to bring him all who were ill and demon possessed. And we see there again the distinction. There were people who were ill and there were people who were demon possessed.
Yeah.
So let's not have people saying, oh, those New Testament people, they blamed everything on demons. No, there are demons and they deal with demons, but there are also just people who are ill. And Jesus cures illness. And we see that again in verse 34. And he healed many who were ill with various diseases, and he cast out demons.
Yeah.
And then it says he was not permitting the demons to speak because they knew who he was. Now this again is just his credentials and his authority, that demons obeyed him, natural illnesses obey him, and his ministry is beginning in this area. Now he's doing these miracles not to show off, but he's doing these miracles as a way of showing the credentials he has, the authority he has as the servant hero.
Yeah.
And so we see this clearly, and we see clearly that he's dealing with illnesses and demons. And he's dealing with them on his agenda. He doesn't want them talking. Now, then we get another detail from an eyewitness about a life in a moment in the life of the the servant hero, okay, the action hero. In the morning while it was still dark. Now, that's another neat detail because we see him ministering into the evening, into the dark. And then we see him very early in the morning while it's still dark. He gets up and he goes to a secluded place where he was praying.
Yeah.
Now, what's your takeaway from verse 35 for us, and the reader? What's the application we see there for us?
Well, he was intentional. He got up.
Okay.
And he went to a private place. He left the house, into a secluded place. And I think it was intentional. It was showing that we need to be intentional on doing the same thing that Jesus was doing, that he prayed.
Yeah, now here, Jesus is the Son of God. And if he thinks it's important to get up in the morning and go pray, do you think it's important for us?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he is not praying. I think the significance of going to a secluded place is the Pharisees prayed in public for show.
Yeah.
They wanted people to see them praying and say, oh man, he's holy because he's praying. Jesus, this is a private thing. He's not doing this for show. That's why it's interesting. The word immediately is not used. The word, now and is not used. It's just saying this is a detail in the hero's life that he gets up early and he goes to a private place and he privately communes with the Father. And that we can take away from that and say, man, if Jesus needed that, I need that.
Exactly.
So we see that in the morning he comes. Now, Simon, this Peter, and his companions searched for him. They found him and said, everyone is looking for you. And he said, let us go somewhere else to the towns nearby so that I may preach there also, for that is what I came for. Now, that's a clear statement that Jesus came, his plan. The servant hero has a plan, and the plan is to preach the gospel.
Yeah.
Right? I came to preach the gospel. Another place he said, I came to seek and to save the lost. Well, that's the gospel.
Yeah.
He is preaching the fact that he is coming as the servant hero to save the lost. He's coming with the good news of the gospel for the lost. That's why he's coming. He's not coming to attract a big crowd. You and I were talking about it. Sometimes it's discouraging when a group of people dwindles down to a fairly small group of people. But we can say, man, that small group of people, we can have a ministry into their lives. It's not all about the crowd.
Yeah.
It can be about a very small group. And if the crowd gets too big, Jesus says, hey, let's go somewhere new, somewhere else where they're just not clamoring after me to cure them, but where they want to hear the gospel, because I've come to preach the gospel.
Yeah.
And then in 39, he went into the synagogues throughout all Galilee, and he, it says, this is significant. He said to them, let's go. And the word in 39, and he went, all right?
Yeah, right.
He went into the synagogues throughout all Galilee, so he's traveling around, preaching and casting out demons. And then it says, a leper came to him, beseeching him, falling on his knees before him, and saying, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Now, I love this. If you are willing, that's showing surrender to the hero. That's showing surrender to Christ.
Yeah.
Right? We should come with not heal me, but we should come with the prayer, if you're willing, I know you can. So he had trust, you can make me clean, but he also had surrender. And we need to come to our prayer requests with that whole idea. Lord, I need this. I know you can give it to me, but I only want it if you're willing to give it to me. I'm not demanding something here.
Yeah. I think we come
a surrender. Yeah, what were we going to
say? We come sometimes thinking that we're owed.
Yeah.
And instead of that surrender spirit.
Yeah.
You know?
And you know, it's I wonder if it says in the next verse that he was moved with compassion. And I wonder if it would have been moving to Jesus to have him show up and say, hey, you've been curing everybody else, cure me.
Yeah.
Completely different attitude, right?
Right.
You know, we Christians can pray and say, hey, I'm a Christian. I shouldn't have any disease. I should have my new car. I should have my wealth or whatever. So do it.
Yeah.
And that's not a kind of a prayer that gets compassion from our Lord.
Yeah.
The compassion comes from surrender and trust. I trust you can do this, but I will surrender to what you want.
Yeah.
We see that same in the garden. But it's also significant that it gives the detail he was a leper. Now, moved with compassion, Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, I am willing, be cleansed. Now, there's no demon casting out here. The leprosy was not caused by a demon. This is an illness.
Yeah.
It's a disease. Jesus is doing it as a disease. He says, I am willing, be cleansed of the disease. But what do you see right here? This word, he reached out his hand and touched him.
Well, the lepers were considered ceremonial unclean.
That's right.
And they couldn't live within the city limits. They had an area where they were excluded to. And so when they come into town, if they was approached, they'd have to say, unclean, unclean.
Stay away, stay away.
Stay away.
And they were ceremonially unclean as far as the Jews are concerned. But as far as the Gentiles concerned, they were contagious.
Yeah.
So people didn't want, even Gentiles, it wasn't about the law. I mean, in Leviticus 13, it does say, don't touch a leper. And they should be outside of the camp. But the reason for that was because leprosy was very contagious at that time. It was worse than COVID-19. Okay.
Yeah.
And the idea was you stayed away from physical contact with a leper. And here Jesus is showing his authority, that he is not afraid of a disease. And he not only says, I have compassion for you, be cleansed, which he could have done.
Yeah.
But he demonstrates this confidence that he has in his own authority over disease to reach out and touch. That would have been kind of eye-opening for a reader.
Yeah.
Wow, he is willing to touch a leper. He's willing to reach out and actually touch a leper.
Yeah, can you imagine the people there saying, "Look, he just touched."
Yeah, there would have been in the group, including in his disciples, I'm sure, there would have been
Yeah,
this gasp of, "Oh, did you see what he reached out and touched?"
yeah,
Okay, which made him
yeah,
ceremonially unclean, but it also, and he doesn't care about ceremony, but it also made him physically vulnerable. And he's saying, I'm not worried about that. I have confidence in that.
yeah,
So we go to the Lord and say, you have dominion over my disease. Now we don't want to be stupid. There's a
yeah,
great verse in Proverbs 27, 11 and 12 that says that we should be prudent and hide ourselves away from disease. And
yeah,
that's quarantining. But we know that if disease is involved, Jesus has authority over the disease, and Jesus is not afraid.
yeah,
And then 42, we get these last four verses. Immediately, the leprosy left him. That's, the disease obeys him. All right, and he was cleansed.
yeah, yeah,
And he, Jesus, sternly warns the leper and immediately sent him away. Now he says to him, and he said, see that you say nothing to anyone, but just go show yourself to the priest and offer and make an offering for your cleansing, what Moses commanded. And we saw that in Leviticus 14. There was, if you were cured, you went to the temple. If you were a Jew, you went to the temple and you gave an offering for that. So this is
yeah,
for the Jewish reader, but it makes a point to the Gentile reader, and that is this. Jesus he heals somebody, and then he gives them a stern warning. And this, again, he wants to control the agenda of his ministry. He doesn't want demons to announce him, and he doesn't want people to, outside of his agenda, he doesn't want people to announce him. And he says, just don't make a big deal of this. Just go to the priest, go to church, and give your offering of thanksgiving, right?
Do you think that he might have been doing this to? I don't want to be known by the miracles, but what I preach.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's using miracles. Now he makes this point later on. People start to follow him for the miracles,
yeah,
for the show, and he goes,
yeah,
no. I do the miracles to establish my authority.
yeah,
My authority over demons, my authority over nature, my authority over disease, and I do it. He didn't heal everybody in existence. He healed people that strategically forwarded his plan of preaching the gospel and his authority to preach the gospel as the servant hero, right?
yeah,
Now,
yeah.
notice something. What's the first word of verse 45?
But
All right. So here Jesus heals somebody, he ministers to somebody, and he gives them a warning. Don't go out and announce this. I just want you to go to church. I just want you to give your offering of thanksgiving. I'll do the announcing around here. But the
yeah,
person he heals does not obey him. Now, this is the first time in the book of Mark that he has given a command that wasn't obeyed.
yeah.
Nature obeys him, disease obeys him, demons obey him, followers obey him. But here we have somebody he ministers to specifically and purposely not obey him. And immediately he says in verse 45, but he went out and began to proclaim it freely and to spread the news. Now, you say, what's wrong with spreading the news? We're commanded to spread the news as New Testament Christians. Yeah, but this is the beginning of his ministry, and he wants to control that agenda. And what happens when he spreads this news of Jesus as the healer? What happens to his ministry is Jesus has to make adjustments in his ministry because this guy disobeyed him. And it says there, the news of him spread around to such an extent that Jesus could no longer publicly enter a city, but he had to stay out in unpopulated areas, and they were coming to him from everywhere. So all of a sudden, Jesus' ministry was compromised by a believer who, with joy and with enthusiasm, started to spread the news before Jesus was ready. And I think we as New Testament believers, we need to be obedient to spread the news, but we better make sure that we're spreading the news the way Jesus wants us to, when Jesus wants us to, and not being so enthusiastic that we step out of the obedience. Maybe we need to learn a little bit before we start to share a little bit. I know when I was a brand new Christian, I went home to my non-Christian dad and tried to witness to him, not knowing anything. I just said, Dad, you're going to hell because you're not a Christian. And that really damaged my testimony to my dad, that later I had to really overcome that to get him to listen to the gospel that was the real gospel. It sounded judgmental, it sounded bad, and I had to get past that. So that's what's happening here. We see that we see someone he healed disobeying him. Now, just because we have been healed of our sin by a Savior doesn't mean we should just go off in enthusiasm and disobey him.
Yeah.
We need to rely on him, trust in him, do what he said at the beginning. If you are willing, you can heal me.
Yeah.
Well, he heals him, and then he says, I am not willing for you to go and announce it. And he says, well, I'm doing it anyway. And it affects the ministry negatively.
Yeah.
We need to learn that lesson. And I think that's an important lesson for the Gentile listener. And listen, that brings us to the end of the chapter. A miracle. We made it to the end of the chapter, Stan.
Yeah, we did, didn't we?
Yeah, we see, don't ever say I can't cover some territory, but we did verse by verse here. And that was important because this is the action hero, again, just demonstrating his authority, but within that context, really showing him what his ministry life was like.
Yeah.
It was a life of compassion. He was the servant hero. He didn't come just in with a sword and stuff. He saw people, he responded to people with compassion and did miracles on his agenda. And he did not allow other things to set his agenda. And he does that to this day. We don't set Christ's agenda. He uses us to set his own agenda, and we need to be aware of that.
Yes. It's good.
So let's end here. Thank you guys for sitting in on our Bible study. Stan and I are blessed to have you here. If you're listening on podcast, be sure to subscribe and get the next podcast in the series. And those of you on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and like and hit that little bell so you get the notification of our next time. Thank you for coming to Bible Study with Friends. You're a friend, and we hope you sit in on our next session of Bible Study with Friends with Stan and I in the book of Mark. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. See you next week. God bless you.